obviously there's challenges with low budget filmmaking. After this experience, what do you take away from having done Damnation?
I like to joke about impending bankruptcy and low budget filmmaking, but at the end of the day, I was a musician before I was a filmmaker, and I was a lawyer before I was a musician, so I could have had the nice big super house now and the 3 kids and all that sort of stuff. That was a career path that was open to me. I chose to go into music in the 1990s because I liked telling stories. So I'm not driven by money, clearly, much to the chagrin of the people I owe it to. What I'm driven by is the opportunity to tell stories that interest me first, and then hopefully those things that interest me will interest some other people too. So even if you dropped $5 million in my lap, and feel free to do so, to make Damnation, I probably would have made a different film. Sure, there might have been some technical things, the lighting would have been different and stuff. It would have been nice to do that, have more time too. We only had 10 days to shoot it, which is just an amazing achievement for the crew and for the cast to be able to do that. But the storytelling wouldn't have changed. I don't think the amount of money you throw at a story changes whether it's a good story or not. So folks can look at the film, and if they don't like the story, giving us an extra $5 or $10 million wouldn't have made it a better story. If you do like the story, give us credit for being able to tell it as best we could on the limited budget we had with the limited resources we had. But it all comes back to story, and then through the story, the actors and the characters and how they translate that story to the screen. And I think we had 3 pretty good actors who did a pretty good job of bringing these characters to life. So that's the kind of thing, as the sort of credit card commercial says, that money can't buy. And that is good acting, a good story, and something that will connect with an audience.
The film calls for a sort of isolated and creepy location. How are you able to utilize this location as character in itself, in many ways?
It's the Stephen King trick, the idea that his setting is Maine. This film is set in Maine, even though we filmed it in Nova Scotia. But that same idea that you find these places. I've spent almost all of my life in Nova Scotia, living. And the year I didn't live here, I was actually living in Scotland. So Nova Scotia is Latin for New Scotland. So I spent all my time in New Scotland or Scotland, by the water, by the ocean. And if somebody was to come here from one of those crowded countries in Asia, they'd look around and say, all of the space, how can you, what do you do with all of the space? So there, Chester is this village on the shore. We're not that far from the actual town. You'll never know it in the film. Like, you can walk 5 minutes outside of town and you're in the middle of nowhere with bears and deers and stuff like that. It's easy to get lost. People do every year. So you can get literally lost, and I think that's a nice thing for being able to get metaphorically lost, which is what the characters, even Lara's characters, certainly are in the film. So the house, I have to say, if we had a little bigger budget and we had a little more time to shoot, the house would have been an even more prominent character. But there's no question that there's one part of the house that is a very prominent character in the film, and it's the basement. So when you see the basement, just think of 2 things. It is really creepy, and it was like a combination of trench warfare and coal mining in Wales in the 19th century. These sort of hunched over guys, cold, terrible working conditions, and actors tied up with duct tape, which probably didn't happen in the First World War, but the other things did. So, then it takes on a life of its own. I think just the way you film something, the way the characters are acting, the fact that we were all living in the house. I mean, it's a creepy house. It's a nice house. It's a lovely house, but it's a creepy old house. There's a brook running out in the back, which you'll see in the film. So all of those, I would take walks every morning in the woods and just stick some Joy Division on and listen to it and sort of come up with ideas and stuff. And that atmosphere bleeds into the people who are making the film. And I kind of like to think that it's going to bleed into the people who are watching the film too.